The message arrived at exactly 6:32 p.m. on March 15, 2024, our 10th wedding anniversary. Running behind at the office. Big project. I'm really sorry, babe. Happy anniversary. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Love you, red face. I read it twice, then locked my phone without replying. For 14 months, those sweet messages had hidden a reality I couldn't yet imagine. At that moment, I still believed my wife was simply overworked. I sat alone inside my pickup truck outside Bastion's Bistro, the restaurant I'd reserved weeks in advance for our special night. The bouquet of white stargazer lilies rested carefully on the passenger seat. They had been her favorite flowers since the day we got married, and every anniversary I surprised her with them. This year, I wanted to hand them to her personally. I'd even bought a new charcoal gray suit, not an expensive designer one, just something affordable from a local shop. Running a small electrical company meant watching every dollar, but 10 years of marriage deserved more than my usual work clothes. For a moment, I considered driving home. Maybe I could invite my best friend, Knox, out for a drink instead. Maybe another disappointing evening would simply become one more memory in a marriage that had slowly grown distant. But the reservation was already paid for. $80 wasn't something I liked wasting, so I decided I'd enjoy dinner alone and quietly celebrate the life I'd spent 10 years building. Looking back now, that simple decision changed everything. At 8:10 p.m., the hostess led me to a quiet table near the rear window overlooking a narrow alley. It wasn't the romantic corner I'd imagined sharing with my wife, but it suited a man dining alone. I ordered a glass of red wine and placed the bouquet on the empty chair across from me. As I unfolded the menu, my eyes wandered across the dining room. Then I froze. Partially hidden behind a decorative wooden divider sat a woman wearing a black evening dress. Not just any black dress. It was the one I'd wrapped beneath our Christmas tree only 3 months earlier. She'd smiled when she tried it on, spun around in our bedroom, and promised she'd save it for a truly special occasion. Apparently, tonight was that occasion. Just not with me. She sat across from an older, sharply dressed man whose tailored suit probably cost more than my work truck. A bottle of champagne rested between them. He leaned forward, speaking softly. She laughed. Not the polite laugh she gave strangers. The genuine one. The laugh that used to fill our kitchen. Then, without hesitation, she reached across the table and kissed him. A slow, familiar kiss. The kind that told me this wasn't their beginning. It was only another chapter in a story I had never known existed. Every sound inside the restaurant suddenly felt distant. The clinking glasses, quiet conversations, soft piano music playing overhead, it all faded into a dull hum. My attention locked onto one thing only. My wife. Her hand was resting comfortably in his. The same hand that had slipped a wedding ring onto my finger 10 years earlier. My chest tightened until it became difficult to breathe. Questions crashed through my mind all at once. Who is he? How long has this been happening? Was every late meeting another lie? I pushed my chair back so abruptly, it scraped across the hardwood floor. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was operating on instinct. I took one step toward their table. Then another. I could already imagine grabbing the expensive bottle of champagne and smashing it across the floor. I wanted every person in that restaurant to know exactly what kind of people they were. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. Before I could take a third step, someone firmly caught my arm. Don't. The voice was calm. Not nervous. Not frightened. Calm enough to make me stop. I turned and found myself looking at a woman I'd never seen before. She appeared to be somewhere in her late 40s, dressed in a navy blazer over a plain white blouse. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, and the only jewelry she wore was a practical-looking wristwatch. Everything about her suggested discipline. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone. She looked like someone who spent years observing instead of talking. "Let go of me," I said through clenched teeth. "I will," she replied evenly, "after you sit back down. My wife is over there kissing another man." "I know." Her answer caught me completely off guard. "I know exactly who they are," she continued, "and if you walk over there now, you'll ruin everything." I stared at her. "What are you talking about? The man she's with isn't just another affair." She glanced briefly toward their table before meeting my eyes again. "He's the reason I've been sitting in this restaurant for the past 2 hours. My anger paused just long enough for curiosity to take its place. "You've been watching them?" "Yes. And unless you want nothing more than a public argument, I strongly suggest you sit down." There was absolute certainty in her voice. No hesitation. No guessing. It was the confidence of someone who already knew the ending, while everyone else was still watching the beginning. Against every instinct I had, I slowly returned to my seat. She sat across from me, placing my wife's untouched bouquet between us. "My name is Vivian Hale," she said quietly. "I'm a licensed private investigator." She reached into her blazer and slid a business card across the table. "I wasn't hired to investigate your wife." She paused for a moment before adding, "I was hired to investigate the man she's having dinner with." I looked toward the corner again. My wife smiled as the waiter poured another glass of champagne. She had no idea that, while she believed her secret was perfectly hidden, the walls were already closing in around both of them. I couldn't take my eyes off the couple across the restaurant. They looked completely at ease, as though the world belonged to them. My wife laughed while the man beside her casually swirled champagne in his glass. Every smile they exchanged felt like another crack spreading through the life I'd spent 10 years building. I forced myself to look back at Vivian. "If you already know who he is," I asked quietly, "then start talking." She nodded as though she'd expected the question. "The man's name is Sterling Mercer." The name meant nothing to me. "He owns Mercer Capital Group," she continued. "Your wife has worked there for several years." I slowly nodded. "I know where she works." "What you don't know," Vivian said, lowering her voice, "is that this isn't his first affair with someone who reports directly to him." A waiter stopped beside our table. "Another glass of wine, sir." I wasn't sure I could swallow water, but I nodded anyway. After he walked away, Vivian opened a thin leather folder she'd been carrying. Inside were neatly organized documents and several photographs. She slid one across the table. It showed Sterling leaving a luxury hotel. A timestamp sat neatly in the corner. Another photo followed. Then another. Each one captured different dates. Different nights. Different entrances. The woman walking beside him in every single picture was my wife. I felt the blood drain from my face. "These were taken over the past 3 months," Vivian explained. "There are many more." I swallowed hard. "How long?" She didn't need me to explain the question. "Our investigation suggests their relationship began around 14 months ago." 14 months. The number echoed in my head. Suddenly, every late-night meeting, every canceled dinner, every weekend conference made horrifying sense. She hadn't been choosing work. She'd been choosing him. Vivian carefully closed the folder. "I wasn't hired because of your marriage." "Then why?" "A woman named Margaret Lawson hired me." I frowned. "Who's Margaret?" Sterling Mercer's former wife. That finally caught my attention. She suspected history was repeating itself. Vivian folded her hands on the table. When Sterling divorced her several years ago, it was because he'd been involved with another employee. So she hired you to catch him again. Exactly. She glanced briefly toward Sterling's table. My client believed he hadn't changed. And she was right. I looked back toward my wife. She was smiling as Sterling whispered something into her ear. The woman I'd trusted with every part of my life looked happier sitting across from another man than she'd looked with me in years. What happens now? I asked. Vivian's expression remained unreadable. Nothing. I stared at her. What do you mean, nothing? You stay exactly where you are. She leaned closer, speaking just loudly enough for me to hear. My surveillance team is following them tonight. I blinked. You have a team. They're already in place. She looked toward the restaurant entrance before returning her attention to me. If you confront them now, you'll get a few minutes of satisfaction. She paused. But if you let us finish our work. A faint, confident smile appeared on her face. You'll walk away with the truth, undeniable evidence, and enough leverage to make sure the people who betrayed you can't escape the consequences. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything Vivian had just told me. 14 months. The number refused to leave my mind. Every business trip, every urgent meeting, every missed family dinner suddenly lined up like pieces of a puzzle that should have been obvious long ago. I need proof, I said quietly. Vivian nodded, almost as if she'd been waiting for those exact words. You deserve more than suspicions. She opened the folder again and carefully removed a sealed envelope. I'm only showing you a small portion of what we've documented. Inside were copies of hotel invoices, photographs, and surveillance notes. Each page carried dates, times, and locations. One receipt showed a luxury hotel reservation, made under the name of a consulting company. Another photograph captured Sterling opening the passenger door of a black sedan for my wife before they disappeared into an upscale hotel. Then came security images, showing them leaving together early the next morning. Each document felt heavier than the last. This can't be, I whispered. I'm afraid it is. Vivian gently slid another document toward me. This is where your situation becomes more complicated. I looked down. It was a financial report. Several monthly deposits had been highlighted in yellow. What am I looking at? Our forensic accountant traced a series of payments made to your wife's private bank account. I frowned. Private account? You didn't know she had one. I slowly shook my head. The deposits averaged $15,000 each month. I stared at the figures without speaking. Month after month. The same amount. The same sender. The transfers totaled more than $200,000. Those payments weren't part of her salary, Vivian explained. They came through a company connected to Sterling. I felt like someone had punched all the air out of my lungs. So he was paying her. That's what the financial trail strongly suggests. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The betrayal wasn't only emotional. It reached into every corner of our marriage. While I was working overtime to keep my electrical business growing and making mortgage payments, she had quietly built a secret financial life without telling me. Every overtime shift I'd worked. Every weekend I'd sacrificed. Every promise we'd made about honesty. None of it had meant anything to her. Across the restaurant, another bottle of champagne arrived at their table. Sterling raised his glass. My wife smiled before clinking hers against it. Neither of them noticed the storm quietly building only a few tables away. I looked back at Vivian. "Why are you giving me all this?" She answered without hesitation. "My client hired me to expose Sterling." She folded the documents neatly back into the envelope. "But you're an innocent person caught in the middle." She held my gaze. "I've watched people destroy their own cases because they acted on emotion." Then she spoke the words that stayed with me long after that night. "Revenge fueled by anger burns fast." She paused. "But justice built on patience lasts forever." For the first time since walking into the restaurant, I stopped thinking about confronting them. Instead, I started thinking about what would happen if I simply let them believe they had gotten away with everything. That night, I didn't confront my wife. I didn't throw the bouquet across the restaurant. I didn't march over to Sterling's table or demand an explanation. Instead, I quietly stood up, left enough cash to cover my untouched wine, picked up the lilies and walked toward the exit. Just before I reached the door, Vivian spoke one last time. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "contact a good family attorney. I'll send everything we've collected directly to your lawyer. Let the evidence speak for you." I gave a small nod and stepped outside. The cool March air hit my face like a splash of cold water. Inside the restaurant, the celebration continued. Outside, my marriage had already ended. The drive home felt strangely peaceful. Not because I wasn't hurting. Because the pain had become too deep for anger. The bouquet rested on the passenger seat, filling the truck with the same sweet fragrance that had surrounded us on our wedding day. Now it smelled like a memory that belonged to someone else. When I reached home, the babysitter quietly let me inside. "The kids are already asleep," she whispered. I thanked her, paid her, and locked the front door after she left. Without turning on many lights, I walked upstairs. My son had kicked his blanket halfway onto the floor, one arm wrapped around his baseball glove, as if he planned to take it into his dreams. My daughter slept peacefully beside her favorite stuffed rabbit, completely unaware that her world was about to change. I stood in the doorway for several minutes, watching them breathe, listening to the silence. Everything I planned to do from that moment forward had to protect them first. Not me. Not my pride. Them. That thought gave me more strength than any burst of anger ever could. I quietly closed their bedroom door and walked into my home office. For the first time in months, I began looking back. Late-night meetings, weekend conferences, business trips that suddenly appeared on the calendar. Designer handbags she'd claimed were employee appreciation gifts. Jewelry I'd never seen before. Expensive perfume. The pieces fit together now with terrifying clarity. I opened our household financial records. At first glance, everything looked normal. Joint savings, mortgage payments, utility bills. Nothing unusual. But then I remembered Vivian mentioning a second account. One I'd never known existed. If my wife had hidden one secret, how many others were waiting to be uncovered? Around midnight, my phone buzzed. An email. The sender's name was Vivian Hale. Attached were several password-protected files. Beneath them was a short message. "This is only the beginning. Give these to your attorney first thing tomorrow morning. Do not contact your wife about the investigation. Patience is your greatest advantage now." I stared at the screen for a long time. Across the hallway, my children slept peacefully. Somewhere else in the city, my wife probably believed she'd fooled everyone. She had no idea that while she was busy protecting her lies, the truth had already begun building a case against her. And by the time she realized it, there would be nowhere left to hide. The next morning, I barely slept. By 7 o'clock, I was already sitting outside the office of one of the most respected divorce attorneys in the city. His name was Daniel Carter, a man known for keeping his emotions out of the courtroom and letting facts do the talking. As soon as I sat down, I handed him my phone. "The files came from a private investigator," I said. "I haven't opened everything yet." Daniel adjusted his glasses and began reading through the documents one by one. For nearly 20 minutes, the room remained silent except for the occasional click of his mouse. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "This is remarkably thorough." I swallowed. "How bad is it?" He folded his hands on the desk. "From what I can see, your wife didn't just have an affair. She appears to have hidden significant financial transactions during your marriage." He pointed toward one of the reports. "These deposits into her private account are going to raise serious questions." "What does that mean legally?" "It means the court may view this as intentional concealment of marital assets." I nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. He continued, "The affair itself is one issue, but if these financial records are authentic, and they certainly appear to be, it changes the entire case." For the first time since the restaurant, I felt something other than heartbreak. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved. Hope that the truth would finally matter. Daniel closed the folder. "Here's my advice. I'm listening. Don't argue with her. Don't accuse her. And don't let her know what you already know." I frowned. "You want me to pretend everything's normal?" "For a little while." He nodded confidently. "People who believe they've gotten away with something often make careless mistakes." He smiled slightly. "Let her think she's still in control." That evening, I returned home before my wife. The children were busy finishing homework at the dining table. My son excitedly showed me the drawing he'd made in school. My daughter insisted I watch her dance across the living room. For the next hour I smiled. I laughed. I helped with math homework. From the outside, we looked like an ordinary family. Inside, I was carrying a secret heavy enough to crush everything we had built. Around 7:30, the front door opened. "There you are," my wife called cheerfully. She walked inside carrying a designer handbag I'd never seen before. I had another late meeting. I looked at her for a long moment. The lie came so naturally. No hesitation. No guilt. Just another practice performance. "Long day?" I asked calmly. She sighed dramatically. "You have no idea." Then she kissed me lightly on the cheek. The same lips I'd watched kissing another man less than 24 hours earlier. Every instinct screamed at me to pull away. Instead, I smiled. "I saved you some dinner." "You're the sweetest," she replied. As she walked toward the kitchen, my phone vibrated inside my pocket. A single message from Vivian appeared on the screen. "Our team continued surveillance last night. The evidence file is now complete." I quietly locked my phone before anyone noticed. My wife believed she had fooled me once again. She had no idea that every lie she told from this moment forward would only strengthen the case that was about to bring her carefully constructed world crashing down. 3 days later, Daniel called me. "We're ready," he said. "I've reviewed everything Vivian's team collected. It's time to move forward." I took a deep breath. "What happens now?" "We file first. And after that, your wife gets served." His confidence was reassuring, but hearing those words made everything feel real. There was no turning back anymore. The paperwork was filed the following week. I went to work like any other morning, inspecting electrical panels at a commercial renovation project. I tried to focus on wiring diagrams, but my thoughts kept drifting back to what was happening across town. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "She's been served." I closed my eyes. How did she react? According to the process server, shocked. I wasn't surprised. People who spend months building lies rarely expect the truth to arrive in a sealed envelope. That evening, I was already sitting at the kitchen table when the front door burst open. My wife walked in, her face pale and her hands trembling. She threw a stack of legal papers onto the table. "What is this?" she demanded. I looked at the documents without touching them. "You already know." Her breathing became uneven. "You filed for divorce." "Yes." "Why would you do this?" The question almost made me laugh. Instead, I remained calm. "Because our marriage ended long before I signed those papers." She stared at me in disbelief. "You think I'm having an affair?" I held her gaze. "I don't think." "I know." The room fell silent. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have an immediate answer. "I saw you," I continued quietly. "Our anniversary. Bastions. The black dress I bought you. The champagne. The kiss." Each sentence drained more color from her face. She slowly lowered herself into a chair. You were there." I was sitting less than 30 feet away. Tears filled her eyes. "It's not what it looked like." I shook my head. "No. It's exactly what it looked like." She buried her face in her hands. "I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I asked. "A mistake happens once. This lasted over a year." She looked up desperately. "I ended it." I didn't respond. "You have to believe me." "I don't." She reached across the table, but I quietly moved my hand away before she could touch it. "I know about the hotel." Her eyes widened. "I know about the secret account." Now she stopped breathing altogether. "And I know about every payment connected to Sterling." She stared at me in complete silence. The confidence she'd carried for months disappeared in seconds. Finally, she whispered, "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that the truth finally caught up with you." She broke down crying. Not the quiet tears of regret. The desperate tears of someone realizing the story they'd carefully controlled was slipping beyond their reach. I stood from the table. "The children don't need to hear this." I walked toward the stairs before stopping. Without turning around, I spoke one final sentence. "You didn't lose this marriage the day I filed for divorce. You lost it the night you chose someone else over the family waiting for you at home." Then I walked upstairs, leaving her alone with the silence and the consequences of every choice she'd made. 5 months later, the divorce was finalized. The courtroom wasn't filled with shouting or dramatic speeches. It was quiet, professional, the kind of silence that comes when every important fact has already been documented. Daniel presented the evidence one piece at a time. The surveillance reports, the financial records, the hotel receipts, the timeline. Each document confirmed a pattern of deception that had stretched across more than a year. My wife's attorney attempted to explain away the hidden bank account as personal savings. The financial records proved otherwise. He argued that her relationship with Sterling had nothing to do with our children. The judge wasn't convinced. Trust, honesty, and judgment mattered when deciding the future of a family. By the end of the hearing, the court ordered that the undisclosed funds be included in the division of marital assets. I was also awarded primary custody of our children, with scheduled visitation for their mother. It wasn't a victory. There are no real winners when a family falls apart. It was simply the fairest outcome the court could reach. Sterling's problems were only beginning. Vivian later informed me that her client had successfully used the investigation to pursue her own legal case. The evidence gathered during the investigation became impossible to ignore. His reputation within the business community suffered almost overnight. Several important investors distanced themselves from his company, unwilling to be associated with the growing scandal. The man who believed wealth could protect him discovered that money couldn't repair a damaged reputation. As for my ex-wife, she lost the executive position she'd once been so proud of. Finding another opportunity at the same level proved far more difficult than she expected. The life she'd risked everything for slowly disappeared, piece by piece. A year has passed since that anniversary dinner. Today, my mornings begin differently. Instead of wondering why someone isn't coming home, I make breakfast for my children. I drive my son to baseball practice. I help my daughter braid her hair before school, even though she still complains every single time. My electrical business continues to grow. We've hired another apprentice, signed several new contracts, and for the first time in a long while, work feels exciting again. Healing didn't happen overnight. Some days are still difficult. Certain songs, certain restaurants, even the smell of lilies can bring back memories I'd rather forget. But those memories no longer control my life. One afternoon, while driving to a job site, my son looked over at me and asked, "Dad, are you happy again?" The question caught me off guard. I smiled before answering, "I'm getting there." He nodded like that answer was enough. Maybe it was. Life isn't about pretending betrayal never happened. It's about refusing to let betrayal decide the rest of your story. Looking back now, I realize the hardest thing I ever did wasn't walking away from my marriage. It was choosing patience over anger. Because had I exploded that night inside the restaurant, I might have lost everything. Instead, I stayed calm. I let the truth reveal itself. And in the end, the people who built their lives on lies faced the consequences of their own choices, while my children and I were finally able to begin a new chapter built on honesty, peace, and hope.